Are you surprised there still is not PS3, PS2, PS1 built-in, open, backwards compatibility added or not? Because my personal opinion is they've got it working. They're just not letting us have it.
They probably do, or they at least have it working in a big group of titles, and then they're determining whether it makes sense to do it or not. I mean, I know there's been like certain CEOs at Sony have been more against or for their classic library, right? It's just interesting with seeing Astrobot, which is just, obviously trying to warm the hearts of every person who's ever touched a PlayStation in their life. And Xbox is always, I think I said this like on the first Broken Silicon I was ever on, but they've treated their ecosystem like an API more than a game development experience for forever. And that the backwards compatibility thing just, looped into that. They were thinking about it as we're creating an abstraction layer for games that gives people quite a bit of power, but also gives them much spread so that we can do things more liberally, like release hardware revisions, even pull backwards compatibility into it. They kind of were thinking about it from, hey, we're building this as a complete API ecosystem outwards rather than a gaming platform first, like PS5. It's the PS5 and it's what it does. They're like, Xbox was always much more, at least since the One era, Xbox One era, more, how do we make this be a, game developers and whatnot don't have to focus intensely on what makes our hardware unique. Instead, they get to approach our systems. It gives them great strength across all of our platforms. It also, kind of coalesces into our PC ecosystem, and then it kicks out all of these things. It's like, it's very smart, and it's extremely well done. And I actually think Microsoft did maybe too good of a job at that because it created such a clear path for everyone to migrate to PC. It sucks that, Lost Odyssey and some games didn't come with you when you want to transition, because there's a lot of classic Xbox games I absolutely love.
Well, I mean, I wish I could play Resistance 2 again or Resistance 3, but they don't have it on anything. And that's where I'm like, well, if they're holding back backwards compatibility so they can sell it to us again, which probably knowing Sony at this point, sure, but they're not selling it to us again. So that's so odd. And don't you think, like, if they would have announced, even if it's probably artificial, PS5 Pro backwards compatibility included, even if you still have to buy a disk drive, like, wouldn't that itself make a lot of people go, oh, I'll get it. I'll get the $700 one. And they still haven't, right? Or I don't know, maybe we do need to come to the conclusion that they really haven't gotten it working yet as well as they want it to be.
I think that they want is to make it work across everything. They want people to be able to play the classic library on a phone, right? And this is why they've turned to cloud with it. But then it's in this weird place between what people love about old games. Like, there's something about thinking about the old hardware when you're playing old games. And even if you're playing their new hardware, you kind of want it to be related. There's some strange family lineage psychology you're playing with there. But they're also seeing, what Nintendo does, where they give you your library of classic games through your Switch, whatever. And it's weird to me that, like, it seems like all of Sony's recent efforts for backwards compatibility have pushed through like more of a cloud-esque approach. But the problem with cloud-esque is video compression in the mix and portability.
And that eventually you're not going to be able to use Cell anymore. So you must have an emulator working on the cloud then, right?
Yeah. So it's a strange thing. People, like, they want to play these classic games, but I think that people have done enough cloud things, and we know the difference. Like, there's so many times I watched something on YouTube for a game that I'm going to play, and I pop it in. It doesn't matter whether it's old or new. And just it different between being like native rendering onto a display versus video compression algorithm with games. There's something about how it looks to me where I'm like, I'm a little put off by this experience. Maybe we'll nail it in 5 years. I don't know. But currently, that's just the vibe. So when you give people their emulated classics through a cloud service, it's kind of this strange thing. So I think that they have it running, but they're also just thinking about how they blanket give PlayStation to everybody. And then they're thinking about on all hardware when they do it.
So you think that they're not sure what their macro level play will be, but you think that they want to make that decision and then do it, and they just haven't made it yet.
Yeah, like the question comes, I don't think that there's any reason that a PS5 can't play PS3.
I was told that there was a version of it working on PS4, but they didn't release it. Like it only worked with like 10% of the games, but they worked perfectly, and it's like, but even then they didn't decide to do it.
But I know for certain there isn't a phone alive that can emulate PS3.
Oh, I see what you're getting at too. Then you want it everywhere,
When they're thinking of cloud, that's why they think that there's some people. I don't know if it's all of Sony, but there's people there that are thinking like, when we do this, we want to be able to do it as a blanket, like access to your library, right? Like you pay for your Switch, whatever. You got NES, Super NES, N64 games. We'll keep dishing out more games as they come out, but you have access to that library. But you have it portable. You have it at home, right? And with old games, it's huge to have portable and home simultaneously. But Sony currently doesn't have a strong portable ecosystem. So their only option is release a portable or get something working in app on phone. And then all they can turn to is cloud. But if they turn to cloud, then your input lag and whatnot is going to be so variable on a phone out in who knows where. You need it to be able to run natively. So sure, they could do PS2 and PS1. Some PS2 they might have problems with on phones. But
you think they might be trying to prepare for some macro PlayStation classics everywhere, and they don't want to do that until they have multiple pieces of hardware able to do that, and they're sure how to monetize it.
Well, if you look at like Game Pass proved a strength and a problem simultaneously. It's two things that it revealed. There's a beauty to like being able to play games online with your friends, right? And not have to worry about who owns things. I play games online with my PlayStation friends and my PC friends and my Xbox friends. And my Xbox friends on PC is actually my best group to play with because we all always have the same games. So, like every time I played on PlayStation, there's one friend that's like, I don't feel like paying for this or whatnot. And then you lose friends and then it's spottier to try to get your play sessions together. And it's a little bit more trouble. And, PC the same when the games, but the second that it's on Game Pass, so that works great with multiplayer games. It was probably I don't think it was particularly the best decision for Hellblade 2, right? Or for...
That's not what that's for, yeah.
But what it does work well for, that kind of library format works well for classic games, having access to classic games, and it works well for multiplayer games that would be close to free-to-play, but not full free-to-play anyways. It works beautifully for that, and it doesn't work great for the single-player massive games, right? It's a conflict of interest in those spaces. So I think to some extent, Sony might be learning from Microsoft's lessons.
Like how to make this its own feature and do it right.
Well, how to make a digital service that's worth its money, that isn't hurting all of its other revenue streams.
Classic games might be the way to do that.
Classic games, and potentially maybe also close to free-to-play multiplayer. Not free-to-play, but close enough, right? Like... that's the right space for it. And that's what Game Pass is the best at, to be perfectly honest. When you're playing a game that you wouldn't have paid attention to or paid for outright, there's been lots of gems I've found on Game Pass in that way. And then the other one was just multiplayer, having the same games as my friends. But, it probably stopped me from buying 10 or 15 games already otherwise that I would have just bought outright at full price. I didn't buy them because they were on Game Pass.
And a lot of devs are complaining about that right now. Like they're like, we don't even make money on Xbox if we launch it there. So, it's a double-edged sword. That's your point though. Sony's like, if we do this right, it will work. If we do this wrong, we'll kill our business model.
There's a lesson to learn in it, right? So it's like, and once again, Microsoft makes a lot of really good decisions too, and they're good people, but I think they've proved that certain things work well in this ecosystem and certain things don't. And we need to start, and if you want to protect your revenue, you need to think about what you put there. Not that the service shouldn't exist, but what goes in that service and what's separate from that service.
All Jessie wants is for Maurice to play with her more often. But unfortunately, he just does not give out playtime or kisses for as low of a rate as she does. And I think she's just going to have to deal with that. But do you know what you don't have to deal with? Paying too much for Microsoft software if you go to CDkeyoffer.com. This piece of content is sponsored by CDkeyoffer.com and their back to school sale. Whether it's Microsoft operating systems, Office products, or even many of the latest games, CDkeyoffer.com provides PC gamers with a product this community deserves. Amongst endlessly elevating component costs, fair pricing on Microsoft keys is one thing that we at least should get, I think. And you know, the Moore's Law is Dead team has been working with CDkeyoffer.com for a very long time. And that's because they're good to me, good to Dan, good to about a dozen family members of friends of mine that have used their services. And they've been really, really good, most importantly, to the Moore's Law is Dead community. So support this channel by using offer code BrokenSilicon to save 25% off Microsoft software, or you can also use Die Shrink to save 3% off everything else on the website like games. Using either of those codes really helps the channel a ton, and it helps save you money. So use those codes BrokenSilicon and Die Shrink at CDkeyoffer.com today.